The world stage is constantly shifting, and recent events indicate significant realignments are underway. Today, we delve into some complex geopolitical developments that you need to know about. Stick around until the end, because we'll be drawing some crucial conclusions about what these changes mean for global stability and international relations. They once referred to it as the Atlantic Alliance, a partnership cemented through conflict, confidence, and collective security. This bond, forged in the crucible of war, was built on trust and the principle of mutual defense. However, if you examine the situation more closely today, fissures are becoming apparent. Subtle but significant cracks are forming in this long-standing relationship. Why are steadfast allies seemingly creating distance from Washington? What prompts European leaders, previously in lockstep with the White House, to now publicly question America's role on the global stage? The reasons extend beyond simple policy disagreements. Underneath the surface, there's a growing current of fear and distrust. A palpable sense is emerging across Europe that the continent must increasingly rely on its own capabilities and chart its own course. This isn't just about divergent political viewpoints. It reflects a fundamental reassessment of security dependencies and strategic priorities. From the corridors of power in Berlin to the heart of the EU in Brussels, leaders are quietly, yet deliberately, redefining their strategic boundaries and red lines. The dynamics are changing, prompting a crucial question. What exactly has shifted? So, what's the catalyst for this change? Let's explore the 10 European nations that are subtly, yet unmistakably, distancing themselves from the prospect of Donald Trump's potential return in 2025. We'll examine the implications of this quiet shift and what it signifies for international relations and the future of global alliances. Understanding these undercurrents is vital, as they could reshape the geopolitical landscape for years to come. We will analyze these developments and offer conclusions at the end of this video. You ever get that feeling when a close companion, someone you've relied on for ages, starts to drift away? It's that noticeable quietness, the slower responses, the distinct coolness you perceive. You sense the change, even if you can't pinpoint the exact moment it began or offer concrete proof. It's an intuition, a feeling in the air that the connection isn't what it once was. Now, scale that feeling up to the international level. This is precisely the dynamic unfolding with Germany. The extent of their divergence might surprise you. Germany, once considered the cornerstone of the US-Europe partnership, the very bedrock of the transatlantic alliance, is now charting a different course. Germany is now constructing its own defense strategy, a roadmap designed for greater self-reliance, notably being developed without direct reliance on Washington's lead. While NATO membership remains, the underlying tone and emphasis have evolved. The commitment to the alliance is still present, but the approach reflects a growing desire for European strategic autonomy. This shift became particularly evident in early 2025 when German officials openly endorsed calls for greater strategic independence. They advocated for a Europe capable of standing firmly on its own military foundations, suggesting a significant move towards self-sufficiency in defense matters. This push signifies a potential recalibration of Germany's role within NATO and its broader security posture. Furthermore, Germany is heavily investing billions in alternative energy collaborations, particularly with France and China. These partnerships aim to diversify energy sources and reduce dependencies. Quietly, these moves are severing the reliance ties that were once predominantly shared with the United States. This strategic shift in energy policy aligns with the broader goal of achieving greater autonomy and resilience. Why this significant change in direction? It stems from observing the perceived pullback of the U.S. from global commitments. Rather than waiting passively, Germany proactively planned for a future requiring greater self-sufficiency. These changes might not be immediately obvious on the surface, but beneath the diplomatic niceties, Germany is already repositioning itself for a new era, indicating that the transatlantic relationship, while still important, is undergoing a fundamental transformation. Make sure to watch until the end, as we will consolidate these points into clear conclusions. What actions do you take when the very ground beneath you seems to shift and tremble? When instability looms, reactions vary. Some individuals freeze, paralyzed by uncertainty. Others react by fleeing, seeking safety elsewhere. But France, faced with geopolitical tremors, chose a different path. France initiated the construction of its own foundation, a strategic fortification against the shifting sands of international relations. As the United States navigates its own complex path through fluctuating foreign policy stances, marked by frequent reversals and changes in direction, France has remained steadfast in establishing its own set of rules and priorities. Paris is determinedly carving out its independent role on the world stage. President Macron's administration recently characterized America's approach to trade, specifically its use of tariffs, as persistent economic tremors that create ongoing instability. You might expect allies to maintain alignment, especially during turbulent times, but the reality is proving different. France is now spearheading efforts to establish a distinct European defense force. This initiative goes beyond merely reforming NATO. It contemplates potentially supplanting NATO's role in certain aspects of European security. The goal is clear: to foster a European defense capability less dependent on external powers. On the trade front, France has actively strengthened its economic ties by forging new bilateral agreements with nations across Africa, as well as with major players like India and Brazil. These partnerships represent a deliberate effort to diversify its economic relationships and reduce reliance on traditional partners. A significant milestone in this strategy occurred in March 2025, when France finalized a €12 billion technology deal. This landmark agreement is designed to completely bypass established U.S. technology platforms, signaling a clear move towards technological sovereignty and independence from American systems. What adds another layer of complexity, and perhaps shock to this evolving dynamic, is the noticeable silence and distance between the French and American presidencies. Official meetings, which once exuded warmth and camaraderie, now feel markedly cooler, resembling the frostiness of a Parisian winter. The easy rapport has dissipated, replaced by a more formal and cautious interaction. Do you still believe France is simply following America's lead? The evidence suggests otherwise. Paris is actively pursuing its own strategic vision, building new alliances and asserting its independence on multiple fronts. Think again. Before we continue exploring these significant shifts, if you appreciate stories that delve beneath the headlines, the quiet departures, the subtle realignments shaping our world, stories often overlooked by mainstream narratives, please consider subscribing to our channel. Hit that subscribe button now. Your support is what enables us to continue our work and bring you more in-depth analyses like this one. It truly helps our channel grow and reach a wider audience interested in understanding the complexities of global geopolitics. What happens when your most influential ally transforms into your most significant economic uncertainty? This is not a hypothetical scenario for Ireland. For this small yet globally interconnected nation, this question represents a pressing daily reality. The potential shifts in U.S. policy create tangible ripples across the Irish economy and its strategic outlook. We are focusing on Ireland, and the speed at which its relationship dynamics are changing might be startling. This is a nation whose economic model, particularly in the critical sectors of pharmaceuticals and technology, has historically been deeply intertwined with U.S. trade and investment. Consequently, any economic or political tremor originating in Washington inevitably sends shockwaves through Dublin. However, the landscape of 2025 presents a starkly different picture. Following President Trump's announcement of another potential round of global tariffs, specifically targeting the vital pharmaceutical industry, Ireland didn't succumb to panic. Instead, it demonstrated strategic agility by pivoting. With over €100 billion in pharmaceutical exports potentially at risk, Irish officials acted swiftly. They immediately initiated back-channel discussions with European Union partners and explored alternative opportunities in Asian markets. These quiet conversations behind the scenes are rapidly translating into concrete steps toward strategic realignment, diversifying Ireland's economic dependencies away from potential U.S. volatility. These quiet conversations behind the scenes are rapidly translating into concrete steps toward strategic realignment. Why this shift? It's driven by the realization that Ireland's economic engine, heavily reliant on specific sectors intertwined with the U.S., could become a primary target in a global trade storm. When faced with such potential disruption, you don't simply wait for the lightning to strike. You seek shelter and build resilience. But perhaps even more surprising than the government's actions is the shift in public sentiment. Irish citizens, traditionally holding pro-American views, are now increasingly questioning the long-term stability and reliability of the friendship. Recent polls reveal a significant 14% decrease in favorable views toward U.S. leadership since January 2025. This isn't just a minor dip in opinion polls. It's a significant warning sign reflecting growing unease. And this shift isn't confined solely to trade relations. Cooperation in defense matters is also undergoing a transformation. Although Ireland is not a NATO member, it has markedly increased its collaboration with European Union security initiatives. This move signals a clear intention to bolster resilience from within the European framework, rather than relying solely on external partnerships. The underlying trust in the predictability of American diplomatic commitments has eroded, and once that foundational trust is damaged, nations, like individuals, start reinforcing their own defenses. You begin to lock your own doors at night, figuratively speaking. Still think Ireland is simply leaning on America? They're not just leaning anymore. They're learning to stand more independently. When the winds of global uncertainty begin to howl, nations react in diverse ways. Some scramble for the nearest shelter, seeking protection under existing alliances. But others, perhaps more forward-thinking, start constructing their own lighthouse, a beacon to navigate the turbulent waters independently. This latter approach is precisely what we're observing with Portugal. You might be surprised at how quietly, yet decisively, this nation has begun to step out from the long shadow cast by the United States. Portugal's actions reflect a broader European trend, yet they possess unique characteristics driven by specific national interests and historical perspectives. In early 2025, Portuguese defense officials caused a stir among analysts by publicly contemplating the acquisition of European-manufactured fighter jets, potentially favoring them over the American F-35s. This consideration wasn't merely about comparing costs or technical specifications. It was a profound statement about confidence and strategic direction. It signaled a growing confidence in Europe's own capabilities and a desire to build a future less intrinsically tied to Washington's shifting political landscape and priorities. This potential shift in procurement underscores a deeper reassessment of defense partnerships. Portugal has consistently valued diplomacy and the transatlantic relationship. However, in recent months, even Lisbon's characteristic patience seems to be wearing thin due to the perceived unpredictability emanating from Washington. As a result, the country is actively recalibrating its foreign policy. There's a noticeable pivot towards strengthening southern alliances, with renewed trade discussions underway across Africa and Latin America, regions that the U.S. hasn't consistently prioritized in recent years. This strategic reorientation aims to diversify Portugal's international partnerships and reduce vulnerability to shifts in U.S. policy. Adding to this, Lisbon recently hosted a significant closed-door summit involving several key European Union nations. One of the central, though discreetly handled topics on the agenda was contingency planning. What should Europe do if U.S. support for NATO becomes conditional or unreliable once more? This discussion transcends routine diplomatic exchanges. It indicates a serious preparation for a different kind of geopolitical future, one where European nations might need to rely more heavily on their collective strength. Portugal isn't just following the European current. It's actively charting its own course within it, building its own strategic lighthouse amidst the gathering storm. You know a significant geopolitical storm is brewing when even the calmest, most neutral waters start showing ripples. And when those ripples appear in a place renowned for its steadfast neutrality, a nation that has historically prided itself on staying out of global conflicts at all costs, you absolutely must pay attention. This subtle shift might catch many by surprise, as it challenges long-held assumptions about international alignments. This brings us to Switzerland. You might find it hard to believe how boldly this traditionally neutral player is beginning to assert itself on the European stage, seemingly picking a side. For decades, Switzerland expertly navigated the complex currents between the world's major powers, maintaining its quiet position. Its focus remained squarely on banking, intricate diplomacy, and meticulously avoiding entanglement in international disputes. Switzerland carved a unique niche for itself, acting as a neutral intermediary and a haven for international organizations and finance. But in 2025, that characteristic Swiss silence was decisively broken. The government issued a firm rejection of a proposed United States free trade agreement. This wasn't a simple trade dispute. Why the refusal? Because influential Swiss lawmakers, particularly those from the Social Democratic Party, expressed a growing belief that the U.S., through tactics like tariffs and economic pressure, was actively attempting to divide Europe for its own strategic advantage. This perspective isn't mere speculation. It's documented in parliamentary debates and official statements. In February, a key parliamentary committee explicitly cited the potential return of Trump's aggressive trade policies as a direct threat to European cohesion, leading them to freeze negotiations on the U.S. trade deal. Consider the implications. A nation defined by neutrality, actively rejecting closer economic ties with a superpower, not primarily due to economic calculations, but because of strategic concerns about geopolitical stability and European unity. But the story doesn't end there. Perhaps the most surprising element is the shift happening within Switzerland itself. The country isn't just opting out of certain US-led initiatives, it's actively opting into Europe. For the first time in many years, Bern is aggressively pursuing tighter economic harmonization with the European Union. This includes revisiting complex talks about aligning Swiss digital standards with established European frameworks, rather than defaulting to American systems. This isn't just about policy adjustments, it's about aligning with people and shared values. Polls conducted in early 2025 revealed a striking trend. 68% of Swiss citizens now support closer cooperation with the EU bloc. This represents a substantial increase compared to previous years, indicating a significant shift in public mindset. The deep-seated trust that once formed the bedrock of US-Swiss economic diplomacy is visibly eroding, and crucially, it's not being readily replaced by alternative assurances. You'd assume a neutral nation would avoid making waves, but Switzerland's silence is over. It's making choices, and those choices are increasingly leaning towards Europe. Sometimes, the very heart of Europe begins to beat to an unexpected, different rhythm. And if you aren't attuned to the subtle frequencies, if you aren't listening closely, you risk missing the crucial warning signs of change. This requires us to look closely at Belgium. This nation is far more than just another European country. It occupies a uniquely central position, both geographically and politically. Brussels serves as the headquarters for NATO, the linchpin of the transatlantic defense alliance. It's also the de facto capital of the European Union, the epicenter of countless EU operations and decision-making processes. Historically, Belgium has been a staunch believer in the transatlantic alliance, a firm advocate for close ties between Europe and North America. However, in the climate of 2025, even this deeply ingrained belief is being severely tested. In January, prominent Belgian leaders publicly voiced open concern. They questioned whether the United States could still be considered a reliable guarantor of European defense in the face of shifting American priorities and rhetoric. This wasn't mere diplomatic posturing or carefully worded language. It was a stark expression of doubt emanating from the heart of the European establishment. It signaled that a country deeply invested in the traditional alliances is preparing for the possibility that those old certainties may no longer hold firm. Behind the closed doors of government buildings in Brussels, Belgian officials have been actively exploring strategies to shift more defense infrastructure and responsibilities towards EU-led initiatives. This involves strengthening European defense cooperation frameworks and capabilities, implicitly reducing reliance on Washington's lead. This strategic exploration is occurring without waiting for the next move from the White House, indicating a proactive approach to managing potential future uncertainties in the transatlantic relationship. And the shift extends beyond defense. Belgium's economy, which thrives on international trade, particularly with the U.S. in sectors like chemicals and aerospace, is also adapting. Since the emergence of the latest U.S. tariff threats, Belgian exporters have initiated the redirection of logistics routes, increasingly favoring markets in Asia and the Middle East. This represents a clear move towards diversification, seeking to mitigate risks associated with overdependence on the U.S. market. These are quiet, calculated moves, but they carry significant long-term impact. But here's the element that might truly stop you in your tracks. Internal polling from March 2025 revealed a startling statistic. Only 39% of Belgians still believe the United States will consistently support Europe's defense over the next decade. This figure represents a precipitous drop from just 3 years prior, a decline too steep to ignore. This erosion of trust is profound and changes the fundamental calculus of the relationship. Belgium isn't panicking in the face of this uncertainty. It's preparing. This preparation isn't born out of hostility towards the U.S., but out of a sober assessment of realism. Because when the very foundations of long-standing alliances begin to shake, even the most loyal and centrally positioned partners start evaluating their emergency exits and contingency plans. When your immediate neighbor is a formidable global powerhouse with a documented history of aggression and unpredictable actions, you don't engage in casual political gamesmanship. Your focus shifts entirely to survival. Every decision, every alliance, every strategic move is calculated through the lens of ensuring national security and sovereignty. This demanding reality shapes the mindset of nations bordering powerful, assertive states, forcing them to maintain constant vigilance. This is the strategic environment for Estonia. This nation has emerged as one of the most strategically astute and alert countries in Europe, constantly monitoring the geopolitical currents. Estonia has traditionally been one of the most vocally pro-American voices in Eastern Europe, especially concerning defense matters and the importance of a strong NATO presence. However, even in Tallinn, the unwavering trust in America isn't what it once was. A subtle but significant shift is occurring, rooted in a deep-seated fear born from historical experience and present-day realities. Estonian leaders, recognizing the shifting landscape, recently began initiatives to significantly boost local defense production capabilities. This move isn't solely about achieving self-reliance. It's a pragmatic response driven by concerns explicitly stated in their internal assessments. According to a classified Estonian National Security Committee memo leaked in February, there's profound concern that Washington's reliability as a security partner can no longer be unconditionally guaranteed. That's a direct quote, a stark assessment from a nation on the front lines. You would be shocked at the bluntness of the language used in these internal documents. And the actions taken reflect this assessment becoming even more tangible. Estonia is actively working behind the scenes with its regional partners, Finland, Latvia, and Poland, to establish a Baltic-led rapid response force. This force is specifically designed to operate effectively, with or without immediate NATO or U.S. support, representing a crucial contingency plan. This isn't merely a backup strategy. It signifies the development of a new, regionally focused security playbook. Technologically, Estonia is also making deliberate moves away from reliance on U.S.-centric platforms. The country recently finalized a significant cyber defense agreement with Japan and Germany. This collaboration aims to build what one analyst described as a firewall without a U.S. plug. For a nation that has previously suffered massive cyber attacks, often attributed to its eastern neighbor, this move away from dependence on potentially compromised or unreliable external systems isn't symbolic. It's a critical measure for survival. But perhaps the most striking indicator of this shift is the change in public perception. In a country where pro-American sentiment has historically been exceptionally high, recent polls show that popular support for full dependency on the U.S. military has dropped by 19% since the beginning of the year. The Estonian people aren't turning hostile towards America. They are becoming increasingly cautious and pragmatic. Estonia continues to value its friendship with the U.S., but in the reality of 2025, that friendship is now demonstrably coupled with a robust Plan B, built on regional cooperation and enhanced self-reliance. There's a critical distinction between standing shoulder to shoulder with an ally and finding yourself standing alone when that ally fails to materialize. This nuanced difference is something America's closest partners are increasingly contemplating in 2025. This brings us to Poland. For years, Poland has been arguably one of the loudest and most consistent advocates for a strong U.S. military presence in Europe. Warsaw has not only welcomed, but actively hosted thousands of American troops on its soil, consistently praised NATO cooperation, and even symbolically named military bases in honor of past U.S. presidents, cementing its image as a steadfast transatlantic partner. However, lately, the tone emanating from Warsaw has subtly but perceptibly changed. Beneath the continued expressions of loyalty, a rising sense of urgency and quiet frustration is palpable. This shift is rooted in the same concerns echoing across Europe: the perceived unpredictability of U.S. foreign policy and its potential impact on long-term security commitments. In early 2025, Polish leaders took a significant step by approving a massive €14 billion expansion of domestic weapons manufacturing. This isn't just a routine budget increase. It's a strategic decision to double down on national independence and reduce reliance on external suppliers, including the U.S. You'd be taken aback to hear what insiders are terming this initiative: strategic insurance in case Washington disengages. This language goes beyond mere defense planning. It reflects a fundamental preparation for a scenario where U.S. support might wane or become conditional. This isn't solely about defense hardware. Even in the realm of trade, Poland is actively taking steps to mitigate overdependence on any single partner. New energy agreements were signed with Norway and South Korea this year, diversifying energy sources away from traditional suppliers and geopolitical choke points. This move signals a long-term strategic pivot towards diversified security and economic strategies, ensuring Poland isn't overly vulnerable to the political winds blowing from any one direction. And what about the Polish people? Polls from April 2025 present a complex picture. While a majority, 65% of Poles, still value strong relations with the U.S., nearly half now believe that Europe must prepare for a future where American support could be unreliable or even absent. This represents a stunning shift in public mindset for one of Washington's most historically firm allies. Poland hasn't severed its ties with the U.S., but it's no longer clinging to them unconditionally. It's forging a path based on enhanced self-reliance and strengthened regional partnerships, building something more resilient for an uncertain future. Finally, let's consider the United Kingdom. What happens when your oldest, most established partner consistently changes the rules of the game, altering policies on trade, defense, and international agreements with increasing frequency? For one particular nation, a historical cornerstone of the transatlantic relationship, the answer is becoming increasingly clear and simple. You start writing your own rulebook. That nation is the United Kingdom. You might be genuinely shocked to observe how quietly, yet deliberately, the UK is altering its global playbook in the face of 2025's geopolitical realities. London is subtly navigating away from reflexive alignment with Washington. This is a nation that, for generations, prided itself on the special relationship with the United States. That phrase, once a staple of diplomatic discourse, is being used far less frequently this year. Why the change? Because after the complexities of Brexit, after enduring years of fluctuating U.S. foreign policy stances, and facing mounting uncertainties about the future reliability of NATO and U.S. commitments, Britain is pragmatically hedging its bets. London is reassessing its global position and dependencies. In March, the UK initiated the AUKUS 5 Economic Alliance. This significant financial and technological initiative brings Britain together with Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and Japan. It focuses on collaboration in key sectors, fostering innovation and trade within this specific group. Notice who isn't the central figure in this new formation? The United States, while still a partner in the broader AUKUS Security Pact, is notably not the leading economic driver of this particular initiative. This isn't just a minor policy adjustment. It represents a significant directional shift, prioritizing partnerships beyond the traditional US-centric model. Meanwhile, the UK's own Defence White Paper, released earlier this year, explicitly outlines a strategy involving reduced dependence on US military logistics. Instead, it emphasizes expanded deployments and security cooperation in the Indo-Pacific region, signaling a diversification of strategic focus. Furthermore, British intelligence agencies are investing heavily in developing new, secure communication and data systems. A key objective is to build infrastructure that no longer defaults to or relies solely on American systems, enhancing operational independence and security. But perhaps the most telling indicator is public opinion. In a recent survey, only 38% of Britons expressed trust in the current U.S. administration to act consistently in Britain's best interest. For a country that has historically stood shoulder to shoulder with America in nearly every major 21st century conflict, this represents a staggering erosion of emotional and political trust. The UK isn't cutting ties, but it's certainly not looking backward either. It is stepping forward, deliberately and strategically, onto its own path, prioritizing flexibility and diversified partnerships in an increasingly uncertain world. Conclusions. Across Europe, from Dublin to Warsaw, Berlin to London, a quiet but profound strategic realignment is taking place. Long-standing allies, while not necessarily abandoning partnerships, are increasingly questioning the reliability of the United States as a consistent guarantor of security and economic stability. This isn't manifesting as overt hostility, but as a pragmatic shift towards greater self-reliance and strategic autonomy. Nations are diversifying their economic ties, strengthening regional defense cooperation, both within and outside NATO structures, investing in independent technological capabilities, and preparing contingency plans for a future where U.S. support might be less predictable or forthcoming. Public opinion in many of these countries reflects this cautious reassessment, with trust levels in U.S. leadership showing noticeable declines. This complex evolution is driven by a confluence of factors, including recent U.S. foreign policy volatility, the potential return of protectionist trade measures, and a growing sense that Europe must be prepared to navigate future crises more independently. The era of unquestioned transatlantic alignment appears to be subtly, yet unmistakably, drawing to a close, replaced by a more multipolar approach focused on resilience and diversified partnerships. Europe is changing, quietly, strategically, and faster than many observers realize, building its own future, sometimes alongside the U.S., and sometimes, decidedly not. Thank you for joining us on our channel today. The events unfolding across the globe are complex, and understanding these shifts is crucial. We've covered a lot of ground, examining the subtle realignments happening across Europe. We hope this analysis provided valuable insights. If you found this video informative, please give it a like. It truly helps us reach more viewers. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into global economics and politics. We'd also love to hear from you in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from. Your engagement is incredibly important for the growth of our channel.